Welcome to this first installment in the platform of Sika Talks, Conversations in Contemporary Arts, an ongoing visiting speaker series hosted by the Studio Arts MFA department. My name is Maya Ray Oppenheimer. It's nice to see some familiar faces in the room and some new faces. I'm an assistant professor across the Studio Arts department and interdisciplinary studies. I'm one of many co-hosts for this series. Some of you who are familiar with Sika Talks know that this is has been ongoing for several years now, that the platform welcomes artists, writers, curators, scholars, teachers from various disciplinary backgrounds and concerns, from various cultural geographies or at various stages in their practices. It is roughly about six platforms that we have each semester. And this semester we are co-hosting them in a slightly different way. For those of you who've been to Sika talks before, you'll know that it also has a particular structure where it's associated with a seminar run in the graduate department, the MFA department. And I am one of the conveners of that seminar. And this year, the students who are in that seminar are also co-hosting this forum. So the way that our setup for this evening will work is I will say a few words about the forum, which I'm doing right now. I'll hand it over to our first guest speaker, Javier González Pesce, who's going to talk about his practice. And then we are going to have a conversation that wraps up the evening that will be hosted by Amélie Bélanger and Eloisa Alcázar. And that is sort of positioning us in the meta aspect of conversations in contemporary art. One of the things that we've been talking about as a seminar cohort is how do we position the conversational mode as artistic practice? And what kind of unplanned or improvisational sparks can come forward when we have this sort of convivial dialogue. Just to bring your attention to some of the past talks that we have held in this space as part of the Sika platform before, I would like you to know that if Alex in the box, if you wouldn't mind just changing slides just for a moment. You can find the archive of previous Sika talks through our department page in the Studio Arts. There is a YouTube channel. Most of the talks are recorded, and this talk also will be recorded. Javier has generously agreed to have his remarks on tape. I also would like to put forward a few important thanks for other co-hosts in the room that aren't directly involved in the Sika seminar that I mentioned, but are certainly invaluable contributors to this gathering space. Of course, that's Karen Zippiger. Many of you know Karen. I don't think she is with us this evening. She's in a phase of work overload, as many of us can empathize with at this period in term. But she has been really helpful in convening this, the sort of logistics and the planning of this talk. Also Kelly Thompson, who sends her regards from Iceland, probably a rainier moment there than we are having here. And also G, who is here. G, you knew the curator of, hello, who has been really helpful helping me get in contact with Javier to organize this talk and the logistics. And the talk is also being co-sponsored by the Darling Foundry. And you had the opportunity to see some of the works that Javier will be speaking about in person at his show, which opens next week on Thursday. And we'll be projecting details around the show at the end of the discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first contributor to the Sika series for this semester. He's no stranger to Montreal. Some of you know him or have seen his work before. He was our participant in the Darling's Residency of the Americas in 2014. And he is busy currently working on his show, which is in dialogue with that precedent. And when I was in email discussion with him in preparation for this forum, he sent along a really beautiful artist's text that refers to his work. So I'm going to read right from it, if you don't mind me quoting you. So I will as thus. In my work, I reflect on how bodies and matter move through space as they react to attractive or repulsive substances and energies. Through a research on entities as love, politics, economy, or other simple physical phenomena such as gravity, I intend to observe how all matter is entangled in a network of attractive forces that define their material, spiritual, or ideological position. A little more background on Javier's work and what brings him up to this moment in your artistic practice. He holds a BFA in sculpture from Arcus University, which is a University of Arts and Social Sciences in Chile, from 2008. He studied at Diego Portales University, also in Chile. He's exhibited his work mainly in Chile, China, Switzerland, where he also lived for a time, and in group shows in Argentina, the US, Greece, Uruguay, and Colombia. Of course, we can add Montreal, Chichaga to your list as well. He was nominated for the Althazar Awards in the category of sculpture in 2012, and won the first prize of the Young Art Contest for the Visual Arts, Museum and Minera Escondida in 2012. Since 2011, he has co-directed alternative exhibition space Locale Contemporary Arts, which you may or may not speak about in your talk, but I definitely want to ask you about in the discussion. That is pretty much all from me. The final thing I will say, to try and cantilever the various SICA talks that we convene over the course of this semester, I've asked each speaker to finish a sentence that I've provided as a prompt. The sentence being, "This conversation is," followed by a blank. As a way to try and sort of think about what is the conversational mode for each and every one of you. So it's sort of like the loose organizing principle of really disparate practices that we'll be hearing from over the course of this semester. And if we could please go back to the poster, Alex, in the back. Javier's suggestion is really evocative and intertwined to the myriad materials and themes he'll be talking about in this platform. This conversation is love, politics, gravity, and other sources of attractive energy. So please join me in welcoming Javier to talk about attractive energies. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for your introduction. Thanks to Concordia and the art school for having me here. I'm very happy and glad to be able to talk about my work to you. I will. This presentation, it's a presentation of a selection of works I've done. From very old works even, like this one, which is a thing I did in 2003. I was studying in university. I defined at a point that I should always start talking about my work through this thing I did. I was not really. It was in the context of a workshop. We were reading Canclini, talking about transcultural situations, and we needed to do a work reflecting on this. And so I was living at this time at an area which was a bit in the outskirts of the city, very rural, but the city was growing and getting to grow over this area. So you had a mix of like the rural kind of activities and some elements of a modern city coming in. So what I did is just talk to this guy that I knew, that he has this cart pulled by a horse, and he was working in the fair usually. And I took him to McDonald's to buy a burger. And but we did it once. It was a bit funny, I guess. But time went by and I couldn't stop thinking about this gesture, this thing that happened, and how it was interesting for me in many ways. And me, I was, as you mentioned, I was formed in sculpture, so I was thinking about this situation. I was a bit uncomfortable with the fact that it has the format or the presence of a gesture, of a situation. And I became obsessed with situation like this could or should have the presence that a monument has instead of just a happening. So in 2017, I decided to go there every day with the same guy to give a bit of strength or or to make this gesture relate with the place in a bit more of a radical way. This was very experimental. I didn't know where I was going with this, but it happened that the first time I did it in 2007, I filmed it. So the manager of McDonald's came to quite angry with me, like to discuss with me what I was doing. All the people that worked at McDonald's were laughing and didn't really get what was going on. Then second time I got the same. Then the fifth time they were like absolutely couldn't believe what was I, because I was not really responding much to them. But the 10th time maybe they were all used to this and they were almost like waiting for me, and they were like completely changing their attitude towards this thing that was happening, towards which they have been reacting in such a way. And suddenly this became very interesting for me. And it was like, how can I modify a behavior or a perception of something without even entering this architectural space, or without even talking to them, just by repeating something. At a point things would be modified or changed, and something would happen. I was very interested also in trying, especially in this situation, in trying to make some kind of dialogue in between two spaces that are never encountering, one space that never enters the other or makes a direct contact with the other. Just by orbiting sort of it, they would establish some kind of dialogue. So after this observation, I did this work. It's a big kind of block, rectangle, installed in an exhibition room. The exhibition room is in a university. And then once you enter, during the opening, you could see these kind of banners like from a protest, and they move just as in a protest, sort of. Then you could walk around the structure, and on the other side there's a little door, and you can see a group of, well, it's the employees, the cleaning employees of the university, who are cleaning all the garbage that I produced by building the cube inside the cube. With these brooms that have a very long stick, and they hold these banners with phrases they've written themselves, addressing their employer, which was this university at this time. In this work, I was very interested in this situation of communication that happens. I feel it has a kind of narrative structure that happens in space. And this observation comes from the previous work a bit, where a spectator gets a message or sees some kind of motion situation that they understand in a certain way, but as they move their own body around the work, they encounter to find another piece, another part that ends up completing the work. In all of these works, I've been feeling that I was having some kind of weird relationship between sculpture and motion, which is something that has always happened in my work. And at a point it put me in a critical situation, but now I'm quite comfortable with it. And then this is a second work I did after this. I did many works under this structure. Like there's a very simple construction which limits two activities, and the two activities dialogue in time and space. I did many works in this format, and I put this one. At this time I was a bit obsessed with doing versions of my own works, so this one was quite political, I would say, and serious, and I was addressing some kind of serious issues. So this one is a bit the comic kind of version of it. And for me it's important because it expands a bit this idea I was working with. Like in the two previous works, you clearly have a nucleus, and then there's a situation that happens from inside the nucleus to a certain kind of perimeter. In this one, I managed to expand this thing, which for me it's very very important now in my work as I deal with it. This is an art fair in Buenos Aires, Argentina. At this time, I was directing another space. It's not local, the one you mentioned. It's another space that I used to direct. This is in 2009. And I did this work, which is basically like this chair that you could, it's quite tall. So when someone is sitting on the chair, they can see the whole space where the fair is located. So your sight is not stopped by the architecture of booths of a fair, but you see the whole space. And I also, well, I might say that those flag drawings, I did them also. And this project, this is a very Chilean thing, I guess, was very much against market and so on. So we did something that's really weird, which is to go to an art fair to try to make works that were critical with art market. But yeah, so we decided not to sell, and we were going to, my plan was to trade those pirate flags. So my goal was to install a pirate flag in the stand of another gallery. That was what I wanted to do. But pirates were a big influence for me, especially also in this work. And I was studying a lot how they do to deal with territory. So I was very interested in this situation, how they control a whole territory, maybe being based on just an island, but they would control a wider territory just by moving and having a lot of strategies and techniques to rule a wider space, to control a wider space. So this work is pretty much about this. At the same time, well, you can see me there with binoculars looking for like above all the stands, and then that's me again. I offered myself to clean the stands, the booths of other galleries in the fair. So, and this broom, it's the same kind of broom, and it holds a kind of seagull, I guess, that I did with paper. So the spectators from my stand, from this stand, were chasing a bit the seagull all around the art fair. Well, this is the map of the art fair, and the crosses are booths that I cleaned with my magic broom, and then the kind of skull thing is our stand from where you could chase the seagull. Every time I was doing this, it would take me like 4 hours to go through every day. So it's 4 hours that spectators can just, and I like this idea very much. Like there's a guy goes to an art fair and suddenly he's just chasing a papier-mâché kind of bird through, I don't know. But for me, this work was very important in the way that it expanded this notion that this formal idea that I was working on, which is there's a nucleus, a center, and then there's something happening around. Then, well, this is a bit the same, but the space, it flattened. It's not just this kind of very center-based kind of situation. It was more expanded. And, well, here, this is part of an exhibition I did, a little work on paper. It happened to be that, as I was telling you, I don't know if I mentioned this, but maybe it was in the conversation before, Chile is a very serious context to produce art. There are some cases of sense of humor in art in the 90s, but yeah, it's very punished, this attitude of being dealing with humor in your work and in your production, as many other things. It's a very serious and intellectual context for art. And there's this contest for young art that you mentioned in the Museum of Visual Arts that is quite an important instance for young artists. And I have applied maybe 4 times with very, I was thinking at the time, very intelligent works about politics, about serious stuff, even dealing with philosophical issues sometimes and so on. And I was never even chosen to take part of the exhibition, which was very, maybe quite sad. So at one point, I think, even as a little kind of intimate gesture of protest and self-humor, I decided to send a proposal that was a work about love, which has been for me a very important subject, a very important source of spatial understanding and relation understanding for art. And so I sent this project thinking I was not going to be chosen, but in the end I happened to end up winning the thing. So, which was quite beautiful, I thought. And then part of the prize is that I had to make an exhibition in the museum. So I decided to go on with this theme, with this subject, and I decided to make an exhibition about love. First time I was doing something like this. And it was very nice and interesting exercise for me. And I would say that the format of the exhibition is many works in sculpture and object-based kind of works. The language from sculpture, it's a bit violence and aggression, and the theme a bit is love. So it's quite a sad kind of exhibition in a way. But as the violence happens over objects, it's not that terrible most of the time. But this is, for instance, a page from a porn magazine that I took. I felt it had a bit of violence. This is the kind of silly and very slight violence I was doing towards objects, which was like to undo the magazine. When the magazine is designed, especially the ones that are like stapled in the middle, the design is like how do you say this? Well, yeah, the pages don't fit the same page. They encounter other pages in the design, in the object when it says assembled, and then it makes sense. But if you undo the thing and take all the pages, you will have like very weird kind of relationships between things. So this has legs of a girl and then kind of Via Lactea kind of a thing, image, which comes from a watch announcement, publicity. So it has this kind of funny thing with porn magazines, because on one side you have like sexy girls, I guess, or yeah, naked sort of girls, and on the other side all this kind of publicity and articles about, I don't know, manly stuff like beers, watches, sports, cars, which for me was very annoying but funny to suddenly put these things together like this. And I was for sure covering portions of that I didn't wanted to be in the image, like the watch or all the text and so on. This is another work. I will not show all the works I did for this show, but it's like this kind of little postcards. It's in Chile, it's very common, like lovers would give to each other with a little phrase and a very cheesy kind of image, and then this kind of colors which I installed. Well, the postcards I made them big, so it's like a poster. And there was this light. This is in the entrance of the exhibition. This light, it's a very hard, very strong light. It's 100 watts, so it was illuminating this composition there in the entrance of the exhibition. It made a kind of reflection that was quite cute, but then the insistence of this light over the papers through the exhibition period, which was about 2 months, ended up destroying the papers and really making the color vanish little by little. So it's also like a kind of animation, a very, very slow temporality. By the end of the exhibition, the papers would have been like really destroyed. This is another very simple work. It's just a cactus. Every day I would go in the morning and tie a helium balloon with the shape of a heart to the cactus. And the helium would last around 6 to 8 hours to be able to hold the balloon up. So during the day, the balloon was coming down towards the cactus, and maybe, close to closing time, the balloons would burst, explode against the thorns. So it's also kind of an animation that, most of the people would just see the very boring parts of it, but some were lucky enough to be there by the time the balloons were exploding. And you can see there's several. This is another work, a bit in that same format of that I was dealing with before, that I've shown you already. There's a central piece, something happening inside, people are outside, but there's a kind of dialogue. In this one, there's a bit more of a participation. It's 2 tables. They're served like for couples, two dishes, two glasses, sometimes flowers and so on. And yeah, all the feet of the legs were mounted over remote controlled cars. So yeah, the remote controls were one was controlling one table and the other one the other table. So yeah, people could go there, play with them. They would crash and things will fall all around, and then in the end you will have this kind of mess. And yeah, I was changing everything every day. And this is another piece I made. I did a room. You can see here how it goes inside the museum. It's like inscribed in, and well, this museum has different levels that are like a bit one in front of the other. So this picture I took from the upper room, from which you could see this room I built. I will. And yeah, I did a kind of pendulum with stones that were hanging from the roof over the inside the room, in fact. So and I made 50 sculptures like this, sort of plaster sculptures, and spectators could use the pendulum. You can see they're pulling it from the upper kind of floor, and they can throw these stones over the sculptures. Also, I was like replacing sculptures, not replacing them, because I was interested in having the mess in the ground and then having like like a accumulation of plaster in the ground, and then people could go and keep breaking them and so on. I will go a bit faster maybe to. Ooh, we just missed violence. Yeah. Yeah, so this for me was a bit kind of a surrealistic situation where you have overlap of two situations. One is like a very realistic room setting for a couple to develop their intimate life, and then there was these sculptures that were over this other situation and the interaction with the public that in the end was making this kind of chaos, and it goes on and on, and yeah. Again, this is kind of the same structure. There's public outside a space. They never get to enter the space, but there's some kind of something of way of entering the space. If it's not through sight, well, it's through this kind of devices. Until this point, I would say that my work was very much about developing formal structures and then installing or using these structures to install some kind of message or some kind of meaning or some kind of topic. But then, well, here, yeah, there's a gap in between my production, but I'm choosing certain works to getting to a point. Oh, okay. Well, that's yeah. I will show you a video that I don't show, never. It was not meant to be shown. I did it just because I'm even sad that I did it at some point. Because this is to change a bit the subject, because let's just watch it. And okay. Okay. So I don't know if you got that the sound comes from the car that goes by. Okay. So yeah, it happened that after working in Chile for many years, I moved to Switzerland to live and to study a master's. And it was very strange for me to arrive there, because in Chile usually I have kind of themes that I'm interested in, or themes that I think are urgent, or things that I would like to deal with. And in Switzerland I was very disoriented in this way. I was living in a very small town also. And one of the things that got my attention from living there, it's that the city looked old and new at the same time. Like, the buildings were old, and I guess they are in fact old, but they look as if they were just built yesterday or something. So it looked like a bit a prop kind of thing. Very strange for me. I was very used to very dirty kind of city, but even though Santiago is not the worst, but it was very strange, and I was really disoriented. But I also was very interested in trying to expand these ideas that were coming from sculpture and performance that I've been doing in my work. So I started to understand the whole city as, if not as a sculpture, sort of like a prop kind of place, like a setting. So I started doing this gesture, which was, I was doing it just like as the work with the horse in McDonald's. I started to do it very often, and it was to try to make encounters, well, not to try, to make encounters between two or three elements that would compose a kind of situation, a moment kind of thing, that could look as if it was just happening by chance, but in fact it's too much to be chance. So that's why I was not wanting to film, because I wanted this to be very real. I was doing it at nights. So I was trying to redo images from movies. This is from Casablanca. So the music is from Casablanca, and the kind of outfits are a bit like Casablanca. So I had, for some time, people in corners, just sometimes it was nothing. They were just sitting in a place or just standing as if they were waiting for something. And then a car would go by with very loud kind of soundtrack from a movie. So there's maybe even less than 1 second that these two things would be in the same kind of space. But I was very interested in the situation that they were bringing. I was very excited when this was seen by someone, but I was also very happy when this was completely in the middle of the night in a little town and no one would see it. I felt the gesture anyways had this kind of strength, sort of. And this kind of works helped me a bit expand my notions and my ideas that I have from sculpture. Somehow I kept, I don't know why I have this thing, it's maybe a problem that I have, but I insist on explaining what I do as sculpture. I think it is because I produce my thinking through elements of sculpture, as gravity, balance, distance, space, and I don't know. And being in Switzerland, I also was questioned. Also, it's a context of doing a master's, so you're questioned about your practice, and they are like about how you call sculpture something that looks more like a performance or this and that. And so one day I was walking on the street, and not in the street, in fact, like a bit in the forest. And I asked myself, what is this thing that I called sculpture? What is it? And I tried to subtract everything from the world but the things I could see. So tried not to have many ideas, and I tried to find a sculpture there in this area that I was walking in. And there was this rock, of course. This was the sculpture. It was very easy to find. I said, yeah, this is a sculpture, but then why this rock is for me a sculpture? And I thought, yeah, well, it still does not move. It's been there for a long time. It's quite mysterious. It has a strong physical presence in space. It must be a sculpture. Beyond our ideas, it looks like it's a sculpture. It gets all the components of sculptures. But then I thought beyond this, and I realized that if I think about the space, outer space, there are other rocks that maybe look very similar to this rock and are maybe quite the same, but they fly, and yeah, they perform some kind of something, and they move. And of course, I got obsessed with this idea of trying to make works for outer space. I couldn't stop feeling that it was beautiful thing, but at the same time, I thought, yeah, well, all our ideas of sculpture, as all our ideas of love, or all our ideas of whatever, are very terrestrial in a way, but there are other spaces that we can think about and that we can even reach with our minds. And at this point, I got really interested by this, but by these thoughts on attraction. I believe that in a way the stone that performs movement in outer space as the stone that performs stillness in the world, in Earth, are in a bit performing these two very different ways because of the same reason, because of their being attracted to something or reacting to an attractive kind of energy. So not moving or moving in the end is a bit the same in this sense. And then, yeah, I started to think so many things. Most of the pure things work in this way. Some just to plain gravity, but some to other more complex sources of attractions, migrating birds, people that, I don't know, do tourism, and mostly everything. And I started to become obsessed with this, and then I also discovered this idea about systems. And I understood that I was not anymore making sculpture in a kind of material way, but in a systemic way. And the previous video I showed you, it's a model, kind of an idea for a systemic sculptoric piece. Very recently, I did a residency at a place where mosquitoes were biting me every night. And one night I just woke up and I killed one. And there was this blood stain on the wall. And I thought for 1 second, like almost asleep, about this blood stain. And I thought, who is this blood? Like, it must be mine, I guess. Or maybe it's the mosquito's blood. And then I imagined that maybe all the nights while I sleep, so besides my consciousness, there's this kind of drops of my own blood flying around my body, carried inside this little mosquito's guts. And this image suddenly became very interesting. And I thought, yeah, who is this blood? And I thought maybe the blood is the blood of this space. It comes from my body, but maybe it was somewhere else before. It was something else before. And I started being very interested in this. And I think it's a very material kind of observation. And this image that I just described, it's a reference for me to think about systemic sculpture. There's maybe a body somewhere. There's something else that's in relationship to this body. And this body is like dismembered in little tiny pieces that move or relate. And then I just didn't thought about the blood or the mosquitoes, but about the humidity in space, my breathing inside this space. So suddenly all this space became some kind of a sculpture. And this is a recent observation, but I use it to talk about an older work I did. This is in Switzerland. You can see again, I'm doing this kind of nuclear work. There's something in the center. This is a work that I was trying to test this notion of systemic sculpture or systemic artistic practice. And so I did many works that not all of them are going to be in this presentation right now. There are many gestures all around the building, in the city, in far places. Yeah. But so this was the center of the work, or what you could see of it mostly clearly as an art piece. The other pieces were a bit infiltrated. So it's like a kind of podium. Spectators could access to it once they walk and see this kind of panel that's over there with a little bit of information. spectators that went there were requested to, if they wanted, to grab these balloons with helium and walk around the podium or this kind of thing I installed there, and as much times as they wanted. So that's me walking around the thing, and tied to the balloons on the image on the right, there is a little stone, which is a meteorite that I bought, a little piece of meteorite, and on the top of this pillar over here, a very old, I think, spider web was there, but I cut it like little planets from a book, and I held them to the spider web. So it was like a kind of planetary system that was sort of floating, but not really floating. It was like suspended by the spider web. So every time a spectator collaborated with me by walking around the piece, this meteorite was orbiting a small planetary system. So yeah, but in a way, I bought this meteorite, and I said to the meteorite, yeah, you were flying, you reached the Earth, so now you're still. I will give you a bit of more of motion. You will move a little bit more, and yeah, that's what happened in this work. Well, then also there's a video there. I broke some plates with the meteorite. I did several gestures with the meteorite, and this is it's part of the same work. Because it makes some kind of reflection about the same things. So I did a skeleton in clay, and I installed it in the roof of the exhibition space. This is what you could see, sort of like. This was not very clear. If someone would just look out through the window on the third floor of the space, you would see this skeleton there. And there's also a little nest next to the skeleton. And I discovered that there were birds, pigeons, living on this roof. So for me, the sculpture is not just the skeleton that I installed there, but its relationship with these birds that live there. So yeah, it's like a very simple diptych about life and death, as many diptychs, but also about stillness and movement. I was very interested in the fact that there was one piece that was just reacting to gravity, as most sculptures do, and there's the other half of the piece, which I couldn't claim it as my piece, a thing that was happening there, but I want to frame into the kind of sensitive thing I was building there. Is not just moving, but not just flying around the city and coming back, but sometimes migrating, breeding, having babies, feeding them, building nests, coming and going. So there's these two elements. One changes or moves, and the other one does not move. And then, well, this is another thing I did. It's a picture of the meteorite, and I enlarged it, and I put it in many places of the city. Like it's a kind of like how do you call this? Like a billboard that's too big, but yeah, like a kind of announcement. And it's just this image that it went through the city. Yeah, well, and here now I will talk about a recent project which is a bit different, and it has a very different tone, I think, because it's about the history of Chile. You will see that my work sometimes, about works like this, it's very much about trying to understand relationships between things, movement, stillness, energies, attractions. But then, well, there's other ones about love and projects like these, which is about politics and the history of the place where I come from. This is a stone that you can find in the center of Santiago, which reproduces part of a letter that Pedro de Valdivia wrote to the Queen of Spain. It's a letter where he is asking for funding for keep going with the conquer in South America. And of course, this poor guy, like, encountered the desert. He has to go through all that. In this area, things are a bit more nicer, easier. but you had natives that were living there, and they were quite tough, resisting to him. And the guy was like hopeless, destroyed, not with a lot of people, hungry probably, and he asked for sources, but to get the sources, he just wrote this letter, which is lying about the territory for sure. So the letter starts with a phrase that would give the name to the exhibition, which is sort of, if I would have to translate, this land is such that to live in it and perpetuate, there is no better in the world. So I like that we know now that this is a complete lie, because this was probably like a desert at this moment, and there's much nothing. But the guy needed money, so he invented this kind of thing, and I think it's a kind of irony that has a lot to do with Chile, in a way, and how it's very hard to live in this territory, but at the same time everyone's a bit enthusiastic and nationalist, and I don't know. So this is one of the things I did. But I would like to say important also is that the gallery where this happened was what influenced me to make these 3 projects. This exhibition consists on 3 projects, and the gallery is very close to all the places where these projects happen. Well, 2 of them, in fact. And I thought about the gallery itself like the center of my systemic sculptures, if we can call them that way. But yeah, so this is the center, the very center of the city, Armory Square. The first construction ever in the city. Well, first construction made by Spanish, by conquerors. And but currently is a place where Peruvian people meet. This is the bigger migration that we have in Chile. And it's been for very long that we have a big migration of Peruvian people. And they gather in this place mostly to looking for job opportunities. They just wait there, and people would go there. They could paint, fix things. They're a bit like yeah, they have many multitasked. So I went there. I started to talk with this group, and I asked them if we could do a walk. I requested them if they could somehow give me an image, a digital image of the sky in Lima, the capital of Peru. And we organized this walk. I printed the images. I gave to them the image of each of them. Most of them would just call a relative, a friend back in Peru, and get the image from there. And I organized this little walk. So we walked through the city. This is them walking with the images of the sky in Peru, through the center of Santiago. And then we go into this hill, which is from where the city is founded. This is the military base from where the Spanish could defeat the natives living there. And we walked until the very top of the mountain, where there's this kind of viewing area, and we did this kind of collage of the Peruvian sky with the Chilean sky as a background. Yeah, things about territory have a big relevance for me in a piece like this. Like, are we as humans territory also, even though we move? If that's the case, through how is territory itself, as we understand, affected by our movement, by migration? And of course, I was thinking about migration as one of these but it's the product of an attractive force that move people from one place to the other for political reasons many times, or economical reasons. And this is the installation of the work in the space. So the banners and the video of the walk and the situation. And this is a second place, second work I showed in this exhibition. It's a big kind of rag with flags printed with this bit abstract images of things that look a bit like if they were clouds, black and white. Yeah, it was a big piece. Well, the images come out from this other image, which is an anonymous reporter from La Nación, a Chilean newspaper, who documented the moment where the government palace was being bombed by the by the military forces in the coup that happened on September 11th of 73. And so I enlarged some proportions of the images, of these images, to make this kind of clouds. This is in fact the building right now, and the original plan was to install the flags on those flagpoles, so somehow to return these images to their place of origin and have them participating of the sky again, of the city, sort of. These clouds would be part of the, as an image, you know, of the sky in Santiago at this point. But sadly, it couldn't happen. The gallery is right next to this place, so for me it was even very important to have the images just kept so close to the place. It had some kind of action somehow, friction or something. And many times my work deals with these kind of things. Like there's some pieces that are exhibited in a state of, like as if they were sleeping, just waiting to perform something. This is the case, or even this one when it's installed. And but I've talked with other institutions. This is a Salvador Allende museum, a museum, that's made after the president that was in fact killed by the time that the coup happened. So we installed some of the flags there, and the project now is ongoing, so it travels a bit. The flags travel through Chile in cultural centers, and these flags are installed in their flagpoles. And this is how the exhibition looked from outside. This is a window through which you can see the inner space of the gallery. And this is the third piece. It's a boat with a nose over it and a large size. And this work, I really conceived it while I was living in Europe. It's at first it has to do with this, what that I was talking about, gravity and a bit the space. I was thinking about the possibility of doing something in the possibility of sculpture in outer space, and then I understood that the sea was sort of this kind of how would you say, kind of a dimension that behaved a bit in between the two spaces. Like it's horizontal, but things move. If I would leave a stone here or a piece of whatever, it will just remain there. But in the ocean, it's moved. It's always changed from its position and lost. So I thought, I would like to make a big sculpture for the ocean, and I would like to do it by parts. So the parts would be the sea could play with them. Currencies would move these things and redefine, reorganize what I'm doing. And so, so it was in a formal way, very, very much of an exercise. But then being in Europe, I, of course, had all these images of people that were escaping their countries and trying to access Europe, mostly from Africa, and through the sea in boats. So I started to think about this relationship of the human body and the sea. Also as the sea as a very special, weird medium through which escape, to try to reach another coast, another space, like like a portal kind of thing where you could move from where you live to another place. And and in Chile, of course, there's another history with a body and the sea, which is very sad. It's also during the dictatorship, many bodies were disappeared in the sea. So it has this kind of connection for me. On the wall, you can see there's a poem by Violeta Parra, a Chilean singer, that talks about exile and this situation of the body being dismembered and being lost in different places. She died before the coup, in fact, but she lived a long time in Europe, and she describes her physical feeling as being spread over territories that she has in her heart. So there's this notion of territory once we think about a body that could be in several parts at the same time. And this is what I was thinking about body as territory and territory as body also, like this possibility of transporting parts of the territory as we move also. And and then very close to this reflection, I started to think about, of course, gravity, which has been an obsession for a long part of my career, we could say. So yeah, if this was about getting things lost in the sea, installing them and see what the sea would do with them, I then remembered that being very young, I would go on the rooftop of my mother's house when I was a kid, and I would find incredible things. I think the first porn magazine I ever saw, it was on the rooftop. I found it there. And I think in Chile, I don't think you have this here, but it's very normal, it's very common that people would throw illegal stuff, incriminating stuff on the roofs. Like, yeah, it's like if you just stole a wallet or something and the police is chasing you, yeah, and you see that they're going to get you, people just get rid of everything that could incriminate them. So by throwing stuff to the roofs is quite a thing, you know. So stolen things of all kinds, even like weapons and stuff like this I could find, of course, balls and things that kids throw, then eggs of birds or dead cats, these kind of things I was finding there. So I liked a lot because I started to think about objects and how they participate of systems, of structures developed by humans, of course. I don't know, a toothbrush will always be in the bathroom, I guess, or even if you find it in the supermarket, it's going to be in the like a toothbrush area, I guess. And so they are prisoners a bit in these structures and systems where they're always spinning around. And yeah, I loved these spaces where objects were a bit rebel and they were making quite promiscuous kind of encounters. So a ball and a glove and a bone and a cell phone. And I started to make sculptural situations with these objects and install them in rooftops like this. This is one of the pieces that's going to be in the Darling Foundry in a very big, large format. And then being here, I did this little thing. It's images trapped on a spider web. It's like a bit of a collage trapped on a spider web. I feel it's a bit like the same situation. These are things that are lost and trapped and stuck in a place. They remain there by chance and they encounter a bit by chance and they're just there. So I wanted to play with this very big kind of human constructions and put it there. And I'm also, another thing that it's been very important to me as in the work with the skeleton and the birds is like this kind of relationship with non-human beings or things and images, content, ideas, human production, human thought in general. So I like this encounter or like these images are held by this living structure that spiders built. And a bit continuing with the previous work, I made other versions. This is the one that's on the poster that Concordia did, and I just try to assemble a human face a bit by its parts in this river, and then the river goes messing with it until it's completely dispersed. And I like that there's these kind of bottles there, and it's kind of the human presence, not just through the representation I do of it, but this real presence of contamination in natural spaces that I think it was interesting for me in this work. And then I did a medium scale version. My thought was that these elements, as they go in the sea, would have remained in one position. I wanted to configure it a human face, like you can see in this image, sort of, and then film the pieces just move slowly. But this didn't happen. They didn't move slowly at all. They moved quite fast. So I was never able to get a first image of just the configuration of a face. So I got a bit desperated, and then I understood I should participate of this thing. And I really liked the presence of my own body in this work, because in a way it's like in this interaction with nature, or with the sea in this case, these elements of the face were reconfigured, they were showed to me in a different way. The water, the waves, the currents were just modifying this human face, and there's this desire of humans to keep things back in place and try to assemble them as they know them, as they understand them, a bit in this maniatic desire to control things. But the medium, very slightly, very patient, it's still pushing things, somehow telling us that there's a need to really see things from a different perspective. And in my experience, yeah, I didn't succeed. You can see how I'm like really struggling to get the pieces, and it's very exhausting. And yeah, I think this is sort of what the message of this work, it was very important for me, or one of the messages that I care about. I don't know how we're doing with time. Maybe I could stop here. Okay, maybe I can just tell about a couple more things. Is it, or we go to the question thing? Good. No. It's fine. It's okay. We can. Yeah, it was just to wrap a bit, but it's fine. Okay. Bah, yeah, very fast. I will. I was recently in China. I did this work. It's. I will go fast with this. I promise. I went into a karaoke. There were many karaokes in this little town where I was doing a residency, and I asked them if they had a song that talks about the sun, and they said, yeah, of course, we have many songs that talk about the sun, because well, what I wanted to do, in fact, is to make a representation of the solar system. So the karaoke would represent the sun, so I needed people singing a song about the sun in the center, and then I had all these little cards, and there were 8, all the planets in the solar system that were going around the karaoke place for as long as the song lasted. So it was a model of the solar system. For me, it was very funny, because this is about energies for me, and attraction, and so on. And I think, well, the sun is the center of the solar system. Usually when we make metaphors and using the sun it's always something very important. From where I come from, usually songs that talk about the sun are about love, and it's a metaphor of love and the desperate kind of attraction you feel towards someone. But in China, it was about politics, which for me, it was very interesting. The sun for them is a metaphor of Mao, so all the songs that they had that talk about the sun talk also about Mao. So it made a lot of sense in the end that all these workers were spinning around and recreating the solar system, around, not just around the sun, but around Mao, or who defined their political structure. And then this is another little thing I did, another model of the relationship of the Earth and the Moon in the attractive system that they do. It's it's a moon that I printed very big, put on a boat, and this moon was spinning around this piece of island over here. So yeah, when I went to China, I just did models of attractive systems of the sun and the planets in the solar system, or the Earth, and this guy painted the situation and sells it now in his shop. I didn't, again, like in the same work, I didn't want it to have the character of a funny thing that happened once, but I wanted to infiltrate the situation in the city in a more permanent way. Yeah, so now I can really stop and Okay. Oh, you're welcome.
I'm just going to slip behind you because I can keep track of time. I think that was a really nice tone to end on, with the themes of, I think, humor that come up in some of your pieces, but earnestness and humility, especially I think with the way that you, and I've heard you use this language as well about giving a visual structure to these attractive energies that you're describing. So we have, can you hear me now? And now, yes. Very eloquent segue is what was taking place just then, which is essentially to please welcome Javier to have a seat, if you wish, on the stage. And Emily and Eloisa are going to start us in the sort of conversation aspect of the evening. We have time for questions and discussions, but whilst we sort of go on to the stage and everybody gets settled in, I wonder if I could ask a very easy semantic question of you, Javier, but also of Emily and Eloisa, if you want to come in on it, which is this idea of attractive energies. And it's a semantic question around what we showcase as attractive energies or assume attractive energies to be. And I'm wondering if you see a difference or perceive a difference to repulsive energies, or if that is just attractive in its other own right, I guess.
I usually, I will sit, I guess. I usually, when I say it, but I in the middle, okay. Usually when I talk about, I don't know why I didn't said it, but repulsive energies, of course, are very important. And I came to observe, I think, that most things that move or even don't move or seem to be not moving, because I guess everything moves, are reacting somehow to attractive and repulsive energies. But I think it's all a bit the same. Like they come from not similar sources, but what produces a repulsive energy is many times possibly a previous effect to a attractive energy, and so on. It's like a chain of energies that could repulse or attract. But I think this thing is very. And I was, once I listened to this interview, Caroline Bagdiev, curator, and she was telling that the problem of politics is that, very much in the line of Bruno Latour, like the problem of politics is that it's been designed for people who can vote, in fact, so it's developed for people who can think or reason, and it should be developed for everything that is attracted to something else. And this way we would integrate everything that's alive, and even we would go beyond. Sometimes things that we cannot even see are being affected by attractive energies, and I think it's quite right. These kind of things should be thought or considered or contemplated by politics, and that's why I think mostly it fails, and we live in such a sad place. But yeah, okay.
That's a question, if you don't mind. Yes, my question is about, you talk a lot about the relationship with objects that you have in this, like, things that you develop with found object and everything, but I see also that in your work, relationship with people is also present. How do you think about those relationships that you create with participants of your work as well?
Yeah, but I would not put them in the same kind of. But I came to be very sensitive with objects, and I have very loving relationship with objects, and many times I humanize objects a lot. I think, like I perceive, it's silly sometimes, but I perceive that I have a kind of admiration for objects that are lost in rooftops, because I can see how they have refused to participate and be functional and participate of our functional world. So they just escape of these cycles, and I feel a kind of admiration and a kind of, and as they're hidden by the sun, the rain, everything, they have this kind of character that humanizes them a lot, for me at least. But my relationship with humans is absolutely very different. But I think there's sometimes no questions that have to do with the same things, like territory. I think to enter a rooftop and find these objects, being rebel, as I said, is entering a kind of territory, a new territory that's a bit an anarchy of objects in a way. It's like a different layer that we never use, and this layer is used by these rebel objects. So it's a kind of territory that they claim. That's why I was very interested in pirates also, and how they deal with territory and this rebel sort of ways of dealing with territory. And in the case of Peruvian people, I was interested in this. What is a migrant community? Is it territory? You know, how do we deal with this? In this work, I was also very interested in noticing that if, again, like in the same case with the objects, you know, if you look up and you just don't observe the world as we have it immediately next to us, you look up, you don't find any limits, any traces of nothing. So what space do we occupy? And it's questions about territory, and that's why I get approached to people sometimes. But yeah, I'm very interested also in, I don't treat neither people as territory itself. I just think that communities sometimes could make us think about territory, problems that have to do with territory and politics. And I'm very interested in working with people. Many times I've wanted to work with people, and I intended to work with people, communities in general. I don't know if I answered. Okay.
Well, thank you. Can we hear me? Yeah. Well, thank you, Javier, for this talk. Very interesting. In fact, Amelie and I have prepared some questions for you, and I think it's better to read it so I don't. So we see that in your work, hope and fatality is apparent, and hope is present when you try, for example, to push matter to resist forces like gravity, and fatality is present when this matter can't resist. This way this is the way you challenge matter, but also expectations that human control can't be exerted into matter. Can you talk about control and loss of control and how you learn to work with this in your practice?
Thanks. Well, I think, but I don't know if control is what I'm going to talk about precisely now, but since I started to trace and try to understand how attractions and repulsions work and how they organize the presence of bodies in space and how things move, I understood that there's some kind of force, sometimes very directed even by politics or by decisions, or by clear decisions that end up organizing people, things, objects, animals, ideas even in space. I guess in this sense control is very linked to this, but I understood that there's a clear chain of attraction and repulsive things. It's like one thing falls, it pushes the other, and everything moves in a very precise way where there's many things involved. And of course, some people know about this and they use it to control. But me, I find a lot of hope when I can see that objects or humans or even ideas or animals can resist to these logics of control, and they experience or they try to experiment parallel kinds of living, parallel kinds of behaving or reacting to these things. And I think for me this has a lot to do with my investigation in general, and I would say even with sculpture. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question a bit. Okay, thanks. Do you want to?
I was just going to say that Maya has a mic, so if ever one of you have a question, you can ask it. Maya will bring the mic to you.
Your question?
Hi. So from what I know, you did the Darling Foundry residency 10 years ago.
No, 5.
5 years ago.
5 years ago, yeah.
And how did you keep that discussion going with the Darling Foundry since you were there 5 years ago and now leading up to a solo exhibition? How did you guys stay in contact, and what was that conversation like?
But I think it was very natural. We never lost contact, especially me and Caroline. We stayed in touch. But whenever there was an earthquake in Chile, she would message me and ask if everything is going fine. And so, like, a very kind of friendly relationship that went on. and in fact, it's not the first time that they asked me if I could do a project for the Foundry, and I don't know. Yeah, it never happened before. I think we had a very beautiful relationship, in fact, of mutual interest and understanding. And yeah, it's very nice that now that there's going to be a celebration of the 10 years of the residency that I did, which is the America's residency, which I did 5 years ago. Finally, there is the chance to make this. And yeah, but I don't really know how it is, but I think it's that there's always been mutual interest and a mutual kind of affection, and in the end it led to this exhibition that I'm working on.
Are there any other questions? I can come to you. Great.
So I was thinking that, I guess when you went to, it was Switzerland, you said that you didn't really know how to work from there. And it seems that you're sort of influenced by the environment that you're in. And this is just, I moved here a year ago and I think the city is insane in a lot of ways. The politics aren't obvious, but as like if we're talking architecture, what you're surrounded by, it's kind of a crazy place. Is that something that you find affects you here, or are you just working on another project and it doesn't really affect you?
Mm-hmm. Thanks. No, but I'm of course very sensitive to these things, and I think I usually would react site sensitive to spaces and to places, and yeah, sometimes I'm very disoriented, and sometimes I'm very, very motivated. In this case, I think but being here in Canada before, it made me have incredible kind of observations. There's a whole line of work that I have developed that I was not showing here, that was produced, has been produced by the by things that were happening here. I came in the winter, for instance, so I think I never saw the street. I just saw snow. Never saw a rooftop. It's the first time that I can get to see these kind of things. And this was very important for me. I was really working with this idea of covering and so on. So it was a big influence. And yeah, I remember like going back from Darling Foundry, a couple of exhibitions that I did in Chile. Yeah, were just articulated for conclusions that I did here, being here in Canada. But I think as the space is big, as the time, we don't really have a lot of time, and I was not in the mood of improvising, and neither the Foundry. We decided that we will show two works, which I'm very happy that these two works were selected to be put together, because in fact, I know the relationship is not very evident, but for me it makes a lot of sense that they would go together. So I took this suggestion that they made, and I'm very excited that I will be able to do, especially, I'm very happy to do versions of these works that already exist. It feels very nice. I've been working. One of them has been produced very much in the logic of a residency, I think, and the other one is a big thing. So I'm working a lot, and I know where I want to arrive at. But so the city itself, in this case, has not really influenced me, but because of the format of the exhibition, we needed to have a bit of a plan from before. But I'm also happy to work like this. Yeah, whenever I do a residency, it's very different. But when you come for an exhibition, especially if the space is big and time is quite tight to just build the exhibition, you need to work in a different way.
So you're going to get a little bit of a half-formed idea from me, but I'm hoping you can help fill in the blanks. When you talked about the mosquito swarm as your body, mm-hmm. Sort of surrounding you, and then I was struck by the similarity between that and then the face floating in the river. But then I was thinking that this mosquitoes, they have blood that come from you as an individual, and then they turn into a swarm, but the face can never be a full face. It is made of parts. Yeah. Like, where do you position do you think that things are consistently swarming, that we have an illusion of the unitary body, or rather are we on maybe completely the other side and we are a unitary body, and then instead there are these swarms that we interact with?
Yeah, but no, I really think that, but if it's easier, like we forget that air is full of water and other stuff, but I'm sure there's bridges in between us, for instance, right now. So I don't know, you can see my contour and my anatomy, it's far from yours, but not so much, in fact. If we were underwater, maybe this is more easy to explain, you know. There's really this kind of a continuous presence of something in between all of us, and it goes beyond, and I guess it goes very far. We could just fly speed of light speed and go far, and it's still the same thing, I think. Still we have this kind of ways of perceiving reality where we move, we can get distant, we can even have this feeling that we're individuals, and I guess we are in many ways, but in many ways we're not neither. So this is something that I've also came to understand and deal with, you know. Ideas like a forest, for instance, or the solar system. There's something. They have an identity and they have a body, but they're composed by parts, and these parts are in dialogue, and they're in dialogue with everything else at the same time. I guess, we sort of perform a kind of individuality. This is why I'm very interested also in how it is that animals or insects or other ways of existence might perceive the same thing that we're perceiving in a certain way, because as I talk right now, we sort of focus in our minds to try to understand what it is that we're talking about through concepts and the way we understand ideas and so on. So, but there's so many things happening. There's dust in the air. There's, I don't know, a kind of climate feeling and colors and so many things. So if we wouldn't be focusing on the things that would make our communication possible, probably we would be perceiving that there's no distance between none of us, and we would just be experiencing our presence here as a presence of a bigger thing. And I think that's the case. So yeah, the mosquito thing, it was very clear way for me to see that my body was coming outside from my body and moving independently outside of my body. And yeah, but then there's a chain of things going on, you know, until you reach the end of the room, but you can go on. You can go on forever.
And there's a question here.
Hello, I was wondering if you have thought about your sort of materially embodied practice in terms of the technology you use and how like the images behind you, and how talking about migration and attractions, and I mean not what's in the image, not the content, but the medium of it. And there's some video in your work, and if you're thinking about travel and information as an embodied way or a material way as well, or if that's ever come into your work, like, yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, but I think I have problems with this most of the time, because as I was telling, when I showed this video of people encountering in Switzerland, and then there's a car with sound, I'm not, I have trouble. I have a problem with recording this thing, because then the situation is not just two people encountering and then music coming and producing some kind of scene, but it's also this added to a guy that's filming it. And this brings something different to the situation, which of course makes it evident as something that's staged and produced, which affects the reception of this situation. But mostly even in a material way, even, you know, of how bodies are distributed in space. I was really interested in producing some kind of awkward, slightly strange situation in public space to be infiltrated in reality. And many times I think that register, keeping, inventing a way to exhibiting these kind of things attempts to the effect of what you want to do. Many times I've came to this kind of a problem in my work. How do I record? How do I? Maybe sometimes I should just tell what I did. Yeah, the problem is that you maybe wouldn't trust me. I don't know. I could invent incredible artworks and just narrate them, but yeah, it's. I always have a problem with this. How do I approach the people? How do I ask them things? But usually when I work with communities or with others, it's nice because you get to get their impressions. I have another kind of experience with them, in my dialogue with them, and I guess the work itself gets nurtured by this experience. But it's different when you want to infiltrate something, or you want to just yeah, because you're so right. I mean, like when I describe the steps I did to make these things, it works, but the process of registering it, or how I go into this shop with a camera to shoot this thing, I think it's there is a there's an archival desire that attempts to reality in some way, or the effect or the presence in reality of certain things. So I'm very, I think it's a very difficult thing for me. And then how those things travel, you know, maybe the only reach and possible effect of this is its real existence in that place, and then there's nothing else to understand beyond that. I can transmit what I'm telling to you about this, but the situation that I'm very interested in is the situation that not even me can understand, I guess. When someone goes into this shop and sees that there's a painting of an island with a moon close to it, you know, this is something that's impossible for my understanding neither, because I'm not from that context. I cannot understand it. So yeah, archiving and registering things, I think it's delicate, but I guess art world requests us as artists to do this. And I wish I could invent or understand a way of doing it with a lot of sensibility and with not really intervening in the experience of whatever it is that I am doing. Thank you.
On that note of intervening, it is 7:30, which is usually when we start to descant our conversations. But there are several hands going up with questions, and I really want to pursue that attractive energy, if I can steal your word couplings. So a few more minutes, is that okay with everybody? We can push our Friday evening. There is a hand in the blue.
Hi. I was wondering what you thought about the notion of agency in all of your work, and like it seems like you're dealing with reactions and like the push and pull of everything, but when it comes to humans, I feel like we get tied up with this middle ground of having to make decisions in our lives, and then there's the we're always reacting to things, but then we have to make decisions sometimes. So I was just wondering what you thought about like that tension in agency.
You know, I have a problem with this question,
Mm-hmm.
which is that I don't deeply understand agency.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a language thing. I'm sorry, I speak Spanish mostly, and I know I'm familiar with the word, but I don't know if you could try to make a little definition of
like the need to make decisions, or the ability to make decisions, or like I feel like a lot of people fight for their own agency. And fight to be what they fight for the ability to just react. And go in modes of attraction and repulsion. So it's like we feel like we have a right to have agency, have the ability to make choices for ourselves. So more, what do you think about having choices, like making decisions?
But well, I don't think I make many decisions in general. Every day I feel like I've made many decisions, but I'm not sure how much I have decided on these things. I think mostly these things kind of happen, and I use this in my work also, because for a long time I was wanting to control and to make my work in a way that I can be very aware of, and trying to know what I was doing and where I was going and what was I wanting my work to be about. But with time I just got to trust in myself. We were talking a bit about this in the beginning, before the talk, so it was a private conversation. But yeah, it's like once I let go, I think also I'm very obsessive with certain things, and I've researched, and I with time also I got engaged with certain topics and themes, and I trust very much that all this information and all my conclusions, even the ones that I cannot remember or even understand, inhabit my body somehow. So whenever I'm doing art, they end up coming out. Before I was like trying to make them come out, and it felt way more forced. And I think that I was doing works that were pretty much solving one problem, because that's what I was trying to do in a way. I was wanting works to be about something or to deal with one problem, and in the end, that's what the work was doing. But right now, I believe that it's better to be stimulated and to follow your interests, really get engaged in the things that you are touched with. Follow these energies that call you, get close to them, commit to them, and if the case is that you really manage to do this, in the end, these kind of ideas inhabit your whole system and they come out. For me, it's been way more easy to talk about political problems through my work since I've been starting to deal with it like this, So I don't really know if I understand the word, but I think the agency in this case is very wide and open, because it has to do with all the things I'm interested in, all the things I research about, all the things I get engaged with as a human being, besides my artistic kind of creative interests, which for me it's as important, my capacities as an artist and my capacities or my engagements as a human being. And I think both dialogue a lot, and in fact is I'm participating of my interests, of my concerns in the real world. This happens to show in the end in my art, and it's way more easy to work like this, I think. More natural, at least for me.
Cool.
I do think that is a really nice note to start to wind things down, at least in this conversation space, because the way that you couch this idea of agency as a choice, and the way that you responded to that, Javier, sort of resonates in my mind with, I guess, the language of how we can think about a vigilance of attention, of an openness to respond to the attractive energies that you've been describing through so many of the pieces that you've brought to our attention in this space. So it's maybe with that ethos that we can move the conversation perhaps to a drink or to somewhere else. If you want to sort of have quick chats at the front of the room with Javier, if you have a burning question, you can do so. But I think maybe pressure off the sort of direction of you on stage for now, and we can have that sort of vigilance of attention in a further convivial manner.